All right. Well, Jim, before we get out of here, one last question. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Graham in Lebanon, Ohio. Apologies ahead of time for the long-winded question.
Uh-oh.
I was just wondering if Jim ever went to or ran any college towns. A city where most of the population was connected to the university, like a Clemson, South Carolina, or Oxford, Mississippi. If so, what were the gates like compared to a normal town? And did wrestlers work differently for what I presume would be a younger demographic?
Well, no, not back then. You never, you had your match that you had. If the house was big, you got better feedback. If it was small, it was like, maybe we'll get out of here a little quicker. But no, there was no reason to change the match because it was college kids versus just a regular crowd. And we did umpty-million college towns, including, Boone, North Carolina, I remember, their Appalachian State. We went there, and that was the height of the first Midnight Rock and Roll angle, and every wise-ass college kid in that fucking building, which if there was 2,000 people there, probably 1,800 of them were from the college, brought tennis balls. And it was it was an open-air video game. They were throwing them from every place in that gym, and I had a tennis racket, right? So I'm just batting them back as they're coming at me. But they were coming too fast, and from behind us, one guy, Bobby, would be in the ring wrestling. Dennis would be on the apron with his back to the ring, keeping an eye out for flying objects. I'm fucking looking around, batting those things back at people, trying to take somebody's eye out. Every once in a while, the college crowds could get a little more rowdy just because they would have time to get together with each other and come up with shit they were going to do that was going to disturb the show. But no, there was no... They did not necessarily any better or worse than any other spot shows back then, except if the college was a sponsor and they were getting a piece of the gate to buy new football uniforms for the football team or whatever, they would sometimes draw better because they had a stake in getting more people in. They'd do better advertising. And I mentioned that Lexington, Kentucky, really the thing that put Jarrett over the top there was when the kids at the University of Kentucky found the wrestling program. He got Lexington was hard to get TV on in the 70s because there were only 3 stations. They were all network affiliates. They didn't have an independent station. And finally, through a contact that Lance Russell had, a program director at WLEX 18 in Lexington, had come from Memphis and knew the power of wrestling on TV and knew Lance Russell. And Lance got the TV on there in 1978. And for doing so, he got the opportunity to run some spot shows off Lexington TV as well. At what are you laughing about?
Is it the story that because he would show up at the Lexington shows, that he was there and one night, like Randy Savage and them started screaming at him in the parking lot?
Yes, that's where Savage and them, when they started ICW, because Lance would come up from Memphis every month to be the ring announcer. Rupp Arena was special. And that was a 400-mile fucking drive for Lancer, but he was getting paid well because he'd gotten him the town. And where I was going with this was the first few shows were in Rupp Arena. They needed events at that time because they had built a 25,000-seat arena in Lexington, Kentucky, specifically because the University of Kentucky basketball team would fill it up every single game. It's basketball in Kentucky. But besides the Rolling Stones, they couldn't find anything else to book in Rupp Arena. Because here, Google the population of Lexington, Kentucky in 1980. This was 1978, but close enough. Every 10-year census. The point is, Jarrett was able to get dates at Rupp Arena because what they would do is they would put a curtain down the middle of the arena and then not open the upper deck. And that way you had an arena. 25% of Rupp Arena would seat about 6,000 or 7,000 people. And that was perfect for wrestling. And we've got Saturday at noon on the NBC affiliate. And there's only 3 stations in town. So they opened up the town, I think in May or June. And the first show did about 1,500 people. And the second show did about 1,300. And then the third show did about 2,500 people. Now people are starting to see the TV, but then we started seeing these pretty girls, young girls coming in, and then the young guys that were with them and or looking for them. And by the fourth or fifth month, they're up over 4,000 people. And it was the kids at University of Kentucky. The girls started seeing Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. This was even before the Fabs and before the rock and roll. But they started seeing Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. And then the guys started seeing Handsome Jimmy Valiant. Whoo, mercy! And then the kids from the college started coming like crazy. And you would see, whereas the other towns, the girls were attractive, all right, but they weren't fashion plates. But you'd see these girls coming in that were going to UK with the cashmere sweaters and the makeup done and the jewelry, and because everybody in Lexington, horse money, right? And it was insane. And then the guys started coming to see the girls. And by the time Lawler came back from his broken leg in 81 and they were starting to do real big crowds, I would say at least 50%, if not more, of the crowds that were doing 6,000, 7,000 people a month were kids from college age, from UK. And that made a big difference. And Jarrett, that Lexington, he only ran it once a month because that was just too big of a building. Louisville was weekly, Memphis was weekly, Nashville, Evansville, Indiana. And they did well. Memphis did phenomenally. But Lexington became the second biggest drawing city in the territory for those once-a-month shows because they would draw more than you could fit in the Louisville Gardens. And that was the second biggest building on the circuit. So Lexington was that's why Bockwinkel would be brought into Lexington, or Terry Funk would be brought in, or Superstar Graham, or whoever the outside stars were. Everybody went to Lexington. That was usually the big card of the month. Did you find anything about the population?
The population in 1980, 204,000. Yes.
Okay, a city of 204,000 people in 1980 was having 12 shows, drawing 5,000 or 6,000. Well, 1980 is a bad year because Lawler was out with the broken leg. In 1981, they ran 12 shows and did between 5,000 and 8,000 people. So let's say an average of 6. Town's 200,000 people. They were selling 75,000 tickets a year to 12 shows. Not bad.
Not bad at all. People could judge this show on their own, but with that, Jim,
I wonder if they're going to be saying the same thing about this one.